uh, looking ahead, good football. We love to see the SEC play out of conference games, but where it really matters and where the SEC championship starts getting, the ratings start, figuring out where teams are going to land, it's going to be SEC versus SEC ball. Week 2 now, we have our first inter-SEC game. We got South Carolina and Kentucky. That's going to be a good one.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good one. And, prior to this season, that was a SEC East matchup. But as we know now, there are no more divisions. So we were talking about this before we went live here and before we recorded. It's really fun to see some of the traditional SEC rivalry games still happening, with the 16-team conference. The schedule's kind of shuffle. There's like one locked rivalry that's kept, and then the rest is just kind of a shuffle every 4 years. So South Carolina, Kentucky gives us our first SEC on SEC game. These two teams are pretty evenly matched in their last 4 matchups. They've split the series, with South Carolina winning the last 2. We're kind of used to some NFL talent at the quarterback position, with Kentucky having Will Levis in the past, and then with South Carolina having Spencer Rattler over the past 2 seasons. But this game, it features 2 new quarterbacks and really 2 new regimes that are starting when it comes to how those quarterbacks are going to run their offenses for these teams. So what were your thoughts when you looked at Lenore Sellers and Brock Vandagriff this past weekend?
I think both quarterbacks had their bright spots. I think that a lot of the fault when we're looking at Lenore Sellers from a stat sheet don't necessarily show what was happening there. We can talk about Brock Vandagriff first and what he was able to do with his explosive weapons, getting them involved in different ways. You talked about it in the last episode. Barry and Brown, they got him involved in, jet sweeps, different ways. That Kentucky offense is being able to utilize the strengths of their receivers. I don't think that stops here. Lenore Sellers had a little bit of a harder time getting his guys involved. When you look at the two units on the field, the best unit for Kentucky is the D-line, and the worst unit for South Carolina is their O-line. So Lenore Sellers, he was facing that pressure, 4 sacks from Old Dominion. If you're getting sacked 4 times from Old Dominion, I don't want to see what that number is going to be against Kentucky if you put up the same performance as an O-line.
Yeah, and in addition to the 4 sacks, one of my concerns with Lenore Sellers is just the amount they're asking of him, like, so early, right? He had 22 rushing attempts. Obviously a lot of intentional intended runs, run pass option. And so, 22 carries on the ground and you're throwing the ball 20 and 25 times, you're taking a bunch of hits against an Old Dominion defense that is it is not as good as Kentucky's. Could pose some potential issues, but it's the first game of the season, and so, like we said last episode, you got the win. If you're South Carolina, I think you rinse and repeat, and you rinse that off, and you focus on the next game, which is going to be Kentucky. The defense played well last game. They forced two fumbles in the red zone, so plays like that are going to be crucial for them to put the offense in a position to score, which is what we saw last week against Old Dominion. When you look at Kentucky, I think it's Delanie Walker at defensive tackle is a preseason All-American, All-SEC type guy. He's going to play a key role, and Kentucky was able to add some culture guys. Dime Subo Karnbavi from Georgia is a 2-time champion, played a key role. Ultimately making some huge stops for them. And then you also look at Dane Key. When you watch the film, I was super hot on Barry and Brown. He had 2 touchdowns. He got involved in the run game. Jamori Macklin got a touchdown, so Jeremy Macklin's cousin. But Dane Key, he seems like to be their glue guy. If you need just a firm possession catch or a big play, he's the guy for it. And so I expect them to continue to spread it out across those 3 receivers. Brock, he only completed 12 passes, but he got 3 touchdowns. The 1 interception he had was a tip pass. So he impressed, and he showed that he has some wheels as well. He's not just a pure pocket passer, and I think he has something to prove this year. And there's no shade to Georgia, but it's a competitive conference, and I think he wants to show that he can hang at any program and that he's a capable starting SEC quarterback, no matter what resources are around him. And so I got Kentucky taking this one. I think it's going to be 31-14. I think that defense is just too strong for South Carolina. I don't think that South Carolina forces the turnovers like they did last week. And I think, once Kentucky gets up on a good lead, they can just kind of wind the clock down at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Brock Vandagriff, something to prove. He's got his original team next week. He's playing against Georgia. So this gives us some time to figure out the SEC play, get some film, some things that he can maybe tweak for that next week's game. But I think Kentucky, like you said, comes out here swinging. It's going to be a bit of a slower start, in my opinion, but the line moved from 9 to 10 in favor of Kentucky. So people's money's on Kentucky. Mine will be too. I think Kentucky wins 24-14. It's going to be more of a defensive matchup. I think Kentucky's playmaking core there from the receivers get some things done.
Yeah, definitely. And it should be a really fun one. I mean, like Kentucky, they're all around really good. And these are the type of games in the past they have traditionally won. The last 2 years they haven't, but typically these are the games they usually win. And so hopefully they're not looking too far ahead to Georgia the following week. But this one should be a really fun one. It's going to be 3:30 Eastern, primetime middle of the day on ABC. So ESPN is definitely taking advantage of that SEC contract and broadcasting these games across all their platforms.
That's right. No, I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see it.